Let's talk shit. As the mother of 2 toddlers, I talk about poop at home all the time. It's an endless source of fascination. But long after my kids' minds have moved on to the next topic, I continue those poop discussions at work. I design ways for cities to systematically manage all of their poop. A city is a system of networks, connecting residents to services and to each other. Pipes carry water to homes and sewage away. Electric lines strung from pole to pole. Phones connected through networks of cell towers. And grids of roads and public transit move us from home to work and home again. Cities are the nodes of service delivery networks, attracting us with urban convenience and interconnectedness. But what happens when one of these networks is missing? What happens when they're all missing? I lived through that once, here in New Orleans, when Hurricane Katrina struck this city. No power, no phones, no water, impassably flooded roads. The city ground to a halt. As people returned home and ripped out wet floorboards and molded walls, the trash piled up in yards and sidewalks, spilling into streets and blocking cars. I remember that winter as uncharacteristically cold, without gas to heat homes. And in a city known for late nights, everyone returned early to homes without lights. 6 years later, after finishing graduate school, I moved to Nairobi, Kenya, one city with 2 very different faces. For half the population, it's a gleaming city of superhighways, high-speed internet connections, rideshare apps, wind power running through the grid, and clean water flowing through the taps. But where I work, in the informal settlements, Nairobi reminds me more of post-Katrina New Orleans. Residents are disconnected from networks and services. There are a lot of cold, dark nights. This is Mukuru Informal Settlement, located in southeast Nairobi. It's estimated to be home to 500,000 people living in an area smaller than Central Park. In place of piped water, vendors sell water by the jerry can. Sewers ring the outside of the community, but don't penetrate inside. The electric utility doesn't serve most of the area, so many residents have connected themselves, DIY style. Mukuru is an ecosystem of resilient people making the best of what they have. One of those people is Brenda Mwelu, a young mother who, even after finishing college, had a hard time finding work. In Kenya, nearly half of all youth are unemployed. In search of jobs and a better life, more Brendas keep moving to the city. This is a global trend. In urban slums around the world, the population is set to double from 1 billion today to more than 2 billion by 2050. Traditional service delivery cannot keep pace with these growing populations. Fortunately, Nairobi has made big strides in bridging some of these gaps, changing the very nature of how systems are built. Wireless mobile networks, solar power grids, pay-as-you-go water provision. But one network is still largely missing: sanitation. This is Hannah Muthoni, a grandmother who's lived in Mukuru most of her life. To make ends meet and support her family, she would travel more than an hour away to hawk goods at a market. Every day, she'd set aside some of her earnings so that her family could access a toilet. In slums, this is commonplace. People pay to access really crappy sanitation. The toilet that Hannah's family used, the only one in her neighborhood, was a shabby and unhygienic pit. At night, when it wasn't safe to venture out even to this toilet, they'd resort to flying toilets, defecating in a plastic bag, and then, in the morning, tactfully throwing it outside when no one is looking. Without a sanitation network, the other networks can't fully function. Just as the detritus of hurricane-ravaged New Orleans spilled onto streets, slowing traffic and spreading mold, the flying toilets littering the slums and the streams of shit running through them slow business and sap communities' health. According to Kenya's own sanitation and hygiene policy, each day its economy loses $1 million because of this. Without good sanitation, as cities grow, the web of networks just starting to connect slum residents to services is shattered. So let's talk shit. Let's talk about systems failure. Why haven't we seen progress on sanitation? I can see 3 reasons. First, let's look in the mirror. We have it too easy. We flush and forget. We know there's some system deep underground that will deal with it. This very absence of shit in our conscious lives can be seen in the absence of any adequate word with which to discuss it. Feces, excreta, turds, poop, doo-doo. Unless you are talking to a toddler, there's no perfect word for a discussion of human waste, even though this is a subject we all encounter every day. Without a word, without a collective conversation, we're not developing a broad societal awareness of the need for better handling of our shit. Second, let's face it, it's just not sexy. Who wants to deal with shit when you could fund wells that provide beautiful, clean water? Those of us who work in sanitation do a bad job of selling the impact. As young people decide their career paths, developing economies craft their budgets, and philanthropists prioritize their giving, shit isn't high on their lists. Third, finally, let's talk dollars and cents. It would seem that the only solution is massive sewer systems. Across the US, aging sewers are being repaired at a cost of billions of dollars each. Now, imagine the enormity of that problem and the corresponding bill in a city without any sewer system at all. With people unable to relate to the problem, unmoved to solve it, or overwhelmed by its magnitude, progress is stagnant. Half the world's population has been left disconnected, living in communities full of shit, with no network or services to safely remove and treat it. This disconnect impacts everything: health, the environment, the economy, and education. Women and girls are especially vulnerable to poor sanitation, a gender disparity that plays out all too clearly in education. To see it, let's go back to Mukuru. This is Janet Loyello, a teacher who set up her own school. Parents and kids were excited to have a place to learn, but with 2 dilapidated pit latrines as the only sanitation options at the school, the dirty toilets made kids sick. Adolescent girls were particularly vulnerable during menstruation. With no safe place to go, they'd skip class altogether. The causes and consequences are clear. Now the solutions. What can we do? Well, we could spend billions of dollars and mobilize millions of people to relocate so that we could install massive sewer systems. But we don't have the time, space, or money to do that. Today's cities need a new plan. We need to build new types of systems designed for the modern urban world of rapid urbanization and impending water scarcity. And that's where I have good news. Cities around the world, from Durban to Manila to Nairobi, are innovating, creating new sanitation networks that solve the scarcity challenges of the modern urban world. I will tell you about the one that I know best, my organization, Sanergy. At Sanergy, we take a systems-based approach to solving the sanitation challenge. We build a dense network of low-cost, high-quality, waterless toilets that we franchise to community members who run them as businesses, to landowners who include them for residential tenants, and to schools who provide them to their students. We then collect all the waste, remove it from the community, and convert it to valuable products, predominantly agricultural inputs, such as fertilizer, that's leading to thousands of farmers seeing increased crop yields and incomes, and addressing local food security issues. People like Hannah and her family now have 24-hour access to safe sanitation. They don't have to worry when night sets in. In schools like Janet's, we've seen a 20% increase in enrollment and attendance. Young girls have a dignified space to cater for their needs. They don't have to miss school anymore. And we've also created hundreds of jobs filled by young people like our teammate Brenda, who earns a good income that supports her family and is even invested in Sanergy toilets for her neighbors. Models like ours raise the bar for innovation and lower the cost of providing sanitation at scale. In fact, it solves the time, space, and money constraints that hinder big infrastructure. Time. In place of years or even decades to lay sewer lines, we expedite that growth curve to weeks. Space. Our facilities fit into even the most crowded neighborhoods. And money. By building an efficient service delivery network and creating products and services valued by customers at both ends of the value chain, urban residents and rural farmers, the Sanergy model cuts the cost of providing safe sanitation to 1/5 the cost of building and maintaining sewers. It's inspiring, but it's not a panacea. This solution must be one of many built into modern sanitation networks, and those networks must be built by governments, private sector, and civil society working together. We know that for every dollar invested in sanitation, there's a 5x ROI. What investor wouldn't want that kind of return? For cities to thrive, we need to talk about how to build smarter systems that service the cities of tomorrow. We need everyone to sit at the table and talk about shit, so that as young people decide their career paths, developing economies craft their budgets, and philanthropists decide their priorities, they all give a shit. Thank you.